A good horror game is something special. It is able not just to challenge us with its gameplay or tell a good story, but to scare us, to haunt our dreams and idle thoughts, even to make us question our own perceptions of reality. In this podcast, we meet the developers of both existing popular horror titles and hotly anticipated upcoming ones to discuss how they do it, what inspires them, and all things spooky and unnerving. Welcome to Talking Terror, the official podcast of the Horror Game Awards. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Talking Terror, the official podcast of the Horror Game Awards. As ever, we're your hosts, Phil and Will. I'm pointing the wrong way. And today we are joined by Nathan Hamley from Headware Games, who's behind Chasing Static, which released earlier this year, was that? If I remember correctly?
Console release was... Yeah, I think the console release was earlier this year. PC release was... it's been 2 years now since the PC release. So,
yeah. And obviously the upcoming Hollowbody as well. So, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, before we get into kind of your own games and talk about them and talking about the things in them, the way we kind of like to start this off is talk about kind of you and how you got into horror as a whole and like what it is that fascinates you the most. So I think that's kind of where we see. I think we probably get a lot of the same answers in terms of we're all this similar generation in terms of where we got into horror and horror games, but it's always fascinating to see where people started.
Yeah, sure. All right, horror. Horror's great, isn't it? Right? We were like spooks. Yeah, I guess. So I played Resident Evil from a really early age. When I was a kid, I guess my mum must have just seen like PlayStation games as cartoons. This is my only real reasoning behind it. Like, oh yeah, low fidelity visuals. They kind of look like cartoons. But so yeah, I pretty much had free reign with the PS1 library, which was cool. Played like loads of demo discs, as most people did. The original Resident Evil was one of the games that I owned. Pretty sure it was the director's cut here in Power Regions. Not replayed it recently, but yeah, that was probably like my first entryway into horror. And then I got the Silent Hill demo. I think that came on Metal Gear Solid. It came with Metal Gear Solid, I believe.
It did, yeah.
And that was super spooky. I guess that was kind of my first introduction to it. In regards to games. Watched The Exorcist when I was a sort of early teenager at like a friend's house sleepover thing, and just didn't sleep at all. I remember trying to sleep with like a pillow over my head, and they're like watching the rest of The Exorcist in the room whilst I was trying to sleep, and that freaked me out a bit as well. So that was kind of my introduction to it. But yeah, I guess you know, if you get on board early, you become a little desensitized to horror, and then you grow to love it, I guess.
I know, definitely. Yeah, so in regards to that, you've got a huge catalogue then of what horror games and other stuff you've been involved with. So what do you believe makes like a good horror?
Okay. Yeah, I'm a big fan of slow burn horror. I think there's like kind of a misconception that horror needs to be scary. And I think horror as a genre is like a vibe. It doesn't have to be scary. And I'm really on board with the vibe. Like probably my favorite film, if not my favorite horror film, is Donnie Darko, which a lot of people probably wouldn't consider a horror film. But it just has that kind of like creepy. I like coming of age films as well, but it has that kind of creepy, unsettling vibe throughout. And one of my favorite songs ever in the soundtrack. But yeah, so was the question? What makes a good horror film or game?
Or good horror, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like awareness that you don't have to just be throwing gore at the screen and like graphical images all the time, like explicitly graphical. And a focus on like atmosphere, slow burn, and then some kind of payoff to that build up. And it's also something that I sort of realized playing Resident Evil was it's the save rooms, that chance to have a break from the oppression, like a breather from the horror. Obviously, Resident Evil, you have like these save rooms with relaxing music, and you're safe in them, at least in the early games. And then something like Silent Hill, you have like the other world, which is sort of really industrial, rusty, dark. And then actually when you go back to Silent Hill itself, when it's like foggy and slightly lighter, it's like a bit of a breather from that. There's still enemies there. It feels like a little bit of a break from that. So yeah, a balance, I think, is really important.
Yeah, because if it's too oppressive, then you'll just get people give up and they just can't handle it and just be like, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, definitely. I think you also kind of get used to it as well. If the whole game, like the Outlast games, I know a lot of people really love them, but I played the second one not that long ago, and it was just constant with the horror vibes, that kind of really extreme horror stuff. There wasn't much of a breather in it, and yeah, it lost me. I didn't finish it, sadly.
No.
Yeah. I know what you mean about it not necessarily having to be scary so much as because when you were talking about Donnie Darko and then you mentioned coming of age, the one that always sticks with me is was it called Stand By Me, the film?
Oh yeah,
because that was based on a Stephen King novel, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or novella, and that's not something people leap at and go, "Oh, that's horror," but obviously written by one of the most prolific horror writers of all time.
Yeah, it's almost that fear of the unknown, isn't it? It's never seeing what's there that's causing all the issue, and that's the kind of thing that plays in your head.
Yeah, it really is an important aspect of it, and that breather, like in between the scares, gives you a chance to reflect on that kind of stuff and think, what's going to be, outside of this save room when I open the door, and what have I got to face?
Yeah, you're like kind of, oh God, what's next? Rather than just, well, here we go, it's carrying on. There's no let up. May as well get on with it. Almost like the weekend and Mondays. But
is there anything more scary than an impending Monday?
No, I don't think there is.
If you can make that in game form, then I think you might be onto a winner. Yeah. So what sort of games do you kind of like? Obviously, we mentioned Resident Evil and Silent Hill, but kind of between then and now, is it always been in that sort of area, or like different types and different styles?
Yeah, I love all sorts of games. I'm a big adventure game fan, like the classic stuff like Monkey Island, Broken Sword. Really, really enjoy the original Discworld games on the original PlayStation. They're on PC as well. And yeah, like quite a wide range of games. I think most gamers probably play quite a variety of games because we're spoiled for choice. Really into like Eco, Shadow of the Colossus, the Tomb Raider games. Just like looking at my shelf here, Tenchu. Absolutely love Tenchu.
Yeah.
I was going to swear then. I don't know if we're allowed to swear, but yeah, Tenchu's a good one. Metal Gear Solid as well has been hugely influential. Big fan of Kojima. And then like indies as well. Loads of love for Kentucky Route Zero. Yeah, quite a lot of games, I think. But generally, with indies and stuff, I'm really into horror because I think indies are just pushing horror. Like, I'm always inspired by other indie horror games. Doesn't matter how much time they've spent on development or how much, how experienced they are with game dev. You can find these games on itch that are people's first games, and they bring stuff to the table that I haven't seen in anything else. And I think that's amazing. Like, it's so inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. It is always kind of baffling in a really good way. Like some of the things that people think of, you'd like,
Yeah.
you know, like if they had a team with a budget of like millions, they'd probably never do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's almost like the more experience you have in making games, the more dull your creativity gets.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, it's all the fresh blood that are bringing these cool ideas.
Yeah, I suppose with all the limits and stuff, like if either financially or professionally, what your abilities are, you always try and find the best, don't you, in what you can do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, what is it? Limitations breed creativity. But yeah, it's never been clearer than like in indie horror at the moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we can clearly see from, I think, last year's Horror Game Awards, it was a majority of it was indie, wasn't it? We had a couple of the big ones, but it was quite interesting to see what got through to the final rounds.
Yeah, I think a lot of them see a huge support because people want more of that kind of thing. They want to support these indie devs so that they carry on to make more stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It almost feels like this is the first year where there's been like a selection of AAA games in that same space. I mean, not that there were none last year, but kind of it does definitely feel like until recently, as you say, it's been carried by indie games.
Yeah, there's been a lot this year. It's wild. I don't buy that many AAA games, but I've bought at least 3 this year because there was like Resi 4 Remake, Dead Space, Alan Wake 2, which is just still blowing me away. It's the best game I've played in a long time. But yeah, it's been busy this year, and then Alone in the Dark early next year coming as well.
Yeah, it's wild.
I'm all for it though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, coming kind of back to your own games, and we'll come on to, I think Hollowbody obviously is upcoming, and there's probably a lot more to talk about there in terms of that, because it's something that's new in the future. But start with Chasing Static. Kind of, this is a much smaller experience than I think people might necessarily kind of expect, and obviously it's not in the same kind of vein as like a lot of us, because you've used things like the sonic exploration and stuff like that. So where did this kind of come from? Do you want to talk about like?
Yeah, so I kind of, I guess, was probably influenced by Oxenfree. Maybe not necessarily realizing it at the start because it had been a while since I played Oxenfree, but that has you sort of, tuning in a radio in various sections of the map, and sort of listening in on these creepy signals. I thought that would be really, really cool in fully 3D. Like, when I sort of thought of the idea, I was like, "Oh, this is great! Why isn't anyone doing this?"
Yeah.
Maybe they were, but anyway, yeah, I was really into the idea. Jumped into it, got like some basic functionality working, and thought, "Oh yeah, I can do this." It was the first time I'd use Unity, really, other than like sort of tinkering in a little bit here and there. My game before it was made in Adventure Game Studio, which is a very different beast. But yeah, so like I started making it, and then I announced it. I was like, yeah, Sonic Exploration. That sounds cool. That's going to get everyone on board. And yeah, I mean, obviously the game involves that stuff, hunting out signals and like seeing these flashbacks. But I think probably a lot of developers would tell you the same. You have these great ideas, and then when it comes to the sort of the meat and potatoes of the game dev, like actually implementing it and getting it done is a different beast. So that was when I figured this needs to be a short story, and it needs to be a short game, and I need to market it and I need to make that pretty clear in the marketing materials. I've done a similar thing with Hollowbody, because Hollowbody is also going to be relatively somewhat short game, and that's just because I mean I like to do everything myself. Not Chasing Static had a fantastic composer, Sota Yoto, who is also my brother. He did the soundtrack for that game, but the other stuff I did myself, and obviously that takes a lot of work. So I try to keep the game shorter scale because of that, and do as much as I can within the limits of like a 2 to 3 hour experience or longer, depending on how much you want to go around hunting radio signals. But
Yeah. And obviously that's like kind of where Hollowbody you're going back into more kind of what people recognize more traditional survival horror, which I suppose brings you back to kind of where you started in terms of what we were saying before about first games you played being Resident Evil and Silent Hill and that sort of thing. So is that
Yeah.
kind of something you've always wanted to be able to make a
Yeah.
game in that sort of vein?
Yeah, definitely. Chasing Static, very first iteration of that was third person, but I couldn't get my head around it, especially like animating third person characters and stuff. It's pretty tricky. But yeah, so I wanted to do something survival horror esque with that game, and then sort of decided to finally do it with Hollowbody. That genre of game on the surface, you look at it and it seems fairly simple. You know, it's like very limited combat, some puzzles and stuff. Puzzles which are like really similar to adventure games. And, you know, I made an adventure game for my first commercial game, so I figured I probably had a handle on that. And then the combat looked really simple. But yeah, it turns out it's not. It's pretty hard. It's like loads of stuff to do. It's like just simple stuff like what do the enemies do when you go into a cutscene that's in a room and you haven't killed the enemies yet? Like, what do you do with them? Do you like just make them disappear? Well, the answer is yeah, you just make them disappear. You could probably like I think yeah, some AAA games will have it so that like you can get interrupted in between using your inventory and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a bit tricky for me. So yeah, there's a lot of aspects of it that were quite tricky, but it's been really fun to kind of finally have a go at survival horror. Survival horror more along the lines of Silent Hill than Resident Evil.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these indie survival horror games are leaning towards the Resident Evil thing, where combat is quite a big part of it, and the puzzles are quite sort of cryptic. You know, finding different keys for different doors with different signs on them, and like you know emblems that you put into statues and stuff. I've kind of gone away from that a bit and tried to ground the puzzles a bit, and in the process simplified some of the puzzles a little bit. And it's yeah more of a focus on narrative than the combat, but the combat is also there and is hopefully scary.
I love that, but well, we can't wait to get it anyway, get it in our hands. So obviously, to our listeners that might not have known much or know much about Hollowbody, can you give us like an overview of like the story?
Yeah, sure. So you play as Mika in the year 2070 something. What is it? I can't remember what year I said it in. It's not 2077 because someone else has used that year for their game recently. It's a sort of distant. I'm calling it tech-noir rather than cyberpunk, mainly because it's not focusing so much on what cyberpunk. I feel like cyberpunk has become recently very much about colorful neon and like augmentations and stuff. This is more along the lines of sort of Escape from New York, something like that. It's influenced by Blade Runner as well, but the tech is more, they call it cassette futurism, old school. But yeah, you play as Mika. She's basically a futuristic delivery driver for the black market. She's experienced with dealing with shady types and ships things from A to B. Her partner, however, is essentially an eco warrior. She's looking into the mystery behind this island that had to be abandoned, this giant city on an island, which happens to look just like Great Britain. And her partner was investigating that and went missing. So Mika has taken it upon herself to go to this abandoned British city in search of her partner. And then loads of stuff happens that's spoilers, but that's the premise. It's like you basically travel to this abandoned city and you get stranded there. And whilst looking for your partner, you must also try and find a way out of the city.
Nice. So everything else, kind of in terms of what you face there and what sorts of enemies, is all cloaked behind spoilers.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where you don't really know what's going on until the end, and even then, you probably don't quite have 100% like certainty on what has happened to you. But some of it's left up to interpretation. Other things are quite like explicitly stated in like stuff you find throughout the game. but it's a story about surviving in an abandoned city that was abandoned in sort of 50 years before Mika gets there. So some of the tech is somewhat futuristic, but most of it's kind of grounded in what we're used to here.
Okay.
I see it as a sort of alternate reality because there's like a few inconsistencies with real life and how real life proceeded forward, kind of intentionally.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's abandoned city.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So, is there any? So, obviously, when you're coming up with the story for Hollowbody, was there any specific inspirations that you got from other, like maybe other different horror games or horror movies and stuff?
So I've just seen your cat, who looks just like my cat. It's amazing. My cat that is currently asleep.
I know. Literally every episode it appears.
Oh, adorable. Yeah, I mean the game is probably quite clearly inspired by Silent Hill. Both Silent Hill 1, 2, and 3, and 4 a little bit. I think they're all good games in their own right.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest influence from that franchise is like the camera system and how you progress through the world. I've tried my hardest to replicate Silent Hill 2 and 3 and 1 because it had a similar camera system where you sort of the camera seamlessly switches between dynamic following cameras and like fixed cameras that kind of move about the rooms a bit. So you've always got a nice framing on your character. But I don't use tank controls in the game. It's all camera relative controls. So it controls you like you would expect a modern sort of game like that to control. So there's been a lot of consideration put into how that works in regards to the cameras and making sure the player doesn't get turned around when camera angles switch and stuff.
Yeah.
I was going to say that because I know if I try to play old like Resident Evil remake with modern controls, every time there's a camera switch, I end up going a different direction.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like it's a lot of tech behind. There's stuff like you code in a system so that when the camera switches, it keeps your relative input from the last camera angle for a few seconds until the stick moves over a certain angle, and then it will update. And they do that in the Resident Evil remake, but still, like the camera angles aren't designed for it, so you're still going to break what they call it the 180 rule in film. But if you basically go over a 180 degree change in angle, then your controls will be reversed, and you end up getting that thing where you like change camera angle and then the character runs back and it changes again, then back again and changes again. So I've in 90% of Hollowbody, I've managed to avoid that. There's a couple of places where I've really wanted a certain camera angle and I had to slightly break my own rules there. But I think, in general, I think it plays pretty well. What are we talking about? Influences. Silent Hill, obviously. More recently, I played Signalis, and that kind of like I don't know what the turn of phrase is. It kind of kicked me in the ass, like to get my stuff in gear and like make my game better, because Signalis was like really, really good, really tight, mechanically and narratively. And like Hollowbody it's not going to come close to how good Signalis was. It's not in the same ballpark, but still that game made me think, okay, I need to try really, really hard to at least come close to this game's orbit. So there's some influences from that, like not directly, not like necessarily thematically or anything, but just kind of in like the quality of the game. It's like it influenced me in that way.
Yeah, no, I can really see, because you can really tell in parts of like the horror game history where a certain game will come out and it will change, or a lot of games take up on that. And I think Signalis is going to be one of those, I think, for us, where we'll see games really take notice of it and go, as you did, like, I really need to turn it up a bit.
Yeah, definitely. It was great to see it so well received as well. Like, there's so many good games that come out that don't necessarily get that traction that Signalis got. But it just seems to really hit the right notes. I think like having sort of an aspect of almost anime style to it helps a lot. The characters are really, really strong. Have inspired lots of fan art and stuff. Because the designs are so good. And it was a really nice, like, sort of intimate story that also didn't give too much of itself away.
Yeah.
Is yeah, very much how I like stories to go.
Mm.
Yeah, that's been an influence. I guess, I don't know. Probably there's a little bit of all sorts of games that I play in Hollowbody. It's like quite a lot of adventure game sort of influences in regards to just, I've tried to make as much stuff in the environment interactable as possible, even if it's just to have a comment from Mika about the situation. Like, you look at a bed and she says, "Oh, no way I'm going to sleep in that. It's filthy." Like, which
Yeah.
is kind of inspired by Heather's attitude
Mm.
in Silent Hill 3. But
Yeah, and I don't know if this is like a straight influence, but when you mentioned that like your ruined city is going to effectively be in like a ruined UK, that's something I know. There's like quite a few like old fantasy books that I've read where like that seems to be a common thing where they rearrange whatever the landscape, and then what used to be Great Britain is now just kind of a broken wasteland that, or some sort of dystopia where evil things happen.
yeah, I think yeah, it kind of lends itself to that a bit, right? Even it's just something slightly grim and depressing about the game,
Yeah,
especially this last sort of 5-10 years or so.
God, yeah.
Yeah,
No.
goodness no, I couldn't think why, but
Um,
yeah, there'll be a little bit of reflection on the current state of things for us in the UK at the moment in Hollowbody. So, but
yeah. But yeah, no, in regards to the setting though, like this, I think it was Vincent from Hearthware, wasn't it, where some of the locations in his game are where he's lived or where he lives nearby. Is that the same, similar to your case?
yeah, so I moved to Bristol about 6 years back now. It was when I was finishing work on guard duty.
Mm.
And yeah, Chasing Static was sort of based in a Welsh village that I visited on holiday. And then Hollowbody, a lot of the architecture is kind of somewhat inspired by Bristol, also inspired by part of Bristol, Kingswood, which is quite near us, which is a bit like still quite brutalist in its architecture.
Mm.
And Swindon, which is like very much near where I grew up. I was born in Swindon Hospital. So it's that kind of like terrace houses, but also like apartment blocks and stuff. Yeah, a bit of a mix of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is kind of like the things that you're more familiar with. You're able to kind of go in more depth. I mean, I was going to say with the Chasing Static, like the kind of location. I'm sure I've been somewhere like that on holiday in Wales before myself. So
Yeah, I
maybe just as dilapidated as well. But
yeah, there's a particular place in Wales that that it's kind of vaguely based on the village of Hearth, and Chasing Static is based on this other place, but I wouldn't dare try to pronounce the name.
Oh,
yeah, as long as it's not the long one, which takes a special
that famous
talent.
one, yeah.
Yeah, it's not
No,
quite as long
definitely.
as that.
No.
You mentioned, I mean, just kind of linking back Chasing Static to Hollow Body. Obviously, in that last one, you mentioned like the main thing that you didn't do was the music. Is that the case again, or?
This time, I'm gonna do the soundtrack myself. So it's kind of, I wanted to be a bit more involved in how the sounds sort of implemented in the game. And like, I'm a musician myself, so it's definitely
Okay.
something that takes an interest. My previous games, I kind of decided to step away from that to save myself a bit of work.
Mm.
But yeah, I was sort of really inspired by some of the stuff that my brother did for the soundtrack in Chasing Static. It's like, oh, I quite want to dip my toes in that. So yeah, I've done like, I do the audio for all my games trailers anyway. Well, for Chasing Static and Hollowbody, I did the music for the trailers. And yeah, I've done sort of a couple of rough tracks for Hollowbody so far, but currently the game is musicless, which is weird because the game is almost complete. But I'm just going to sort of sit down and have like a couple of months or a month, depending on how long it takes. I might be being optimistic here, of just like writing music for the game, because I'll already know like all the situations and locations that music is needed for. And yeah, I'm hopefully going to do some like nice like layered reactive music. So, you know, you'll have an ambient background track and then like layers of instruments come in based on what's happening in the game. At least that's the plan anyway.
Yeah.
There's presumably like a challenge to that as a like from a composer point of view anyway. You've got to kind of link all the pieces together thematically, and then you've also got to on top of that work out all the coding to make sure that it operates dynamically. Does that make things like exponentially harder, or is it actually quite simple to get it all in place?
Yeah, maybe ask me that question in a few months' time. We'll see. No, in theory, it should be all right. I've already got some dynamic stuff going on with the sound effects. It's like the sound design for the game is very almost finalized now in regards to sort of sound effects and enemy sounds and stuff. And yeah, hopefully, in theory, working the music in is just going to be sort of another layer on top of that.
Yeah, fair enough. Because I
yeah.
think that's one of the things that's always impressed me about like when they manage to get the music so it kind of like eases back if you're like away from combat. Then if you get in like danger, then it all ramps up. But if you come back again, it'll go back down and stuff like that.
It's something quite unique to games in that regard, I think. And I always think anything like that is unique to this medium of games, we should try and take advantage of if we can. But yeah, I think the theory behind it's fairly simple. You're essentially playing all layers of the full composition at the same time with a bunch of layers muted, and then like fading them in and out, and they're still in sync because they started playing at the same time. But yeah, computer games are hard, so it probably won't be that simple when it comes to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my code knowledge is far like many years behind yours, so I would just say, good luck with it. And
thank you. Yeah,
because I'm still at the stage where trying to put an animation on a bullet breaks the game. So
I tried doing a laser sight recently and just realized that that's just a whole like it's just infinitely harder than I thought it would be. Making games is all smoke and mirrors. Apart from smoke and mirrors, I heard that somewhere recently. Like smoke and mirrors are really, really hard to do. But yeah.
Yeah. So obviously you're doing all the work yourself. What's been the biggest challenge that you faced so far with developing Hollowbody?
By far, it is animation. When I started out, like I was making a character controller, and I thought, oh, okay, there's loads of animations available online. You can buy packs of animations. You can go to a website called Mixamo, which everyone uses because it's like ex-Adobe, or maybe still Adobe, but it's just got loads of free animations for everything. So I made a character controller that you can move about and stuff. And then suddenly I was like, oh, I want the character to be able to aim and move at the same time. And then that's like a whole separate set of walking animations. It's like the body has to be turned to face the enemy, and therefore the legs have to be turned. And then like walking backwards is no longer turning around. It's like, and you've got strafing and stuff. And then you go to do a cutscene, like with two characters, and you think, yeah, I want them to talk, but they need to have like natural kind of movements to their arms and their body. And so I spent a bit of time like sort of getting my head around creating animations. I've done a little bit previously, but soon realized that you can make quite a nice animation yourself, or at least in my case, it just looks really weird next to like a motion capture animation, because it's like been hand animated and motion capture's got all these nuances to it. Yeah, animation's been really hard.
Yeah.
It's been a like real challenge. I've had to kind of design around it in a lot of aspects. say I've not quite got the Silent Hill cutscene level of animation, like not even close really, but at least sort of like combat and stuff have all got nice smooth animations, and just that's been hard, and also keeping things in scope, just trying not to like sort of be over ambitious with stuff, trying to still have a good, like I was saying before, like a satisfying experience, but in a shorter period of time. You have less time to introduce players to things because of that. It's mostly animation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the kind of other side of that in terms of what's been most fun?
Most fun by far, I think, with most of the games I've done, like it's the artwork mainly for me. It's like the artwork and kind of deciding on the themes and lighting scenes. Really enjoyed creating Mika's character model because I was sort of trying my hardest to hit a similar level of quality to the Silent Hill characters. But yeah, the art stuff's really fun for me. I reckon the soundtrack is going to be like a real nice reward after all of this techie stuff. Really looking forward to doing that. And I enjoy sound design as well, just sort of creating environmental sounds that kind of, are unnerving. Stuff like there's an apartment block in the game, and I stole something from Silent Hill where you can like hear someone walking in one of the rooms above you whilst you're in the room below. But little things like that, like every now and then you'll hear like a door creak in another room, or like some like mumbling coming from a different room, or like wind rushing through a window, and like rain hitting on glass and stuff. I really wanted to put a focus on sound design. That's been really enjoyable too.
Cool. Yeah. Have you had to do like those things like when people make monster sounds, they like mash together, I don't know, like a dog and a creaky door and all this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I've recently pitched down the sound of a pug. Like, pugs have issues breathing. So they make a pretty like interesting noise as it is. If you pitch that down and EQ it a bit, you can get some fun noises. It's quite challenging, the monster noises, because I wanted them to sound unique, and like a lot of stuff's already been done. I think for me, one of the most unique monsters in regards to games for sound design anyway is probably like the clickers from Last of Us, or just the enemies in The Last of Us. They all have quite a cool soundscape to them, so it's looking to that for inspiration a bit. I made some weird noises with my mouth for monsters that kind of worked in some cases it didn't. And then like downloaded a bunch of sample libraries and chopped up stuff, mixed stuff together like you say, and put effects on them and things.
Yeah, it is always fascinating to hear like when these things come out and then you're like, oh, actually this comes from these parts which are like made up of very unassuming normal things.
Yeah, it's like a pug, for example, quite cute little doggo, turns into some evil monster.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, once we learn which one, then no matter how grotesque it looks, we'll probably be
we'll just go. It's a pug.
That's a pug. Very cute.
Someone will come along and just rip the sound file and then just pitch it back up, and then it's just in dog again. But
oh god.
Oh, so as you've been developing this, obviously this is something you've been like on Twitter and other places. Has it been good to like having community support as you've been going on and building anticipation for the game?
Yeah, honestly, it's amazing. I really couldn't do it without having some kind of like support community behind it. It's been fantastic. We got like a nice little Discord going for Headware games, although it's more of just like a social gathering space where people talk about games and stuff, and every now and then I'll post updates. And the Twitter community has been really supportive over the last few years. ever since I started making horror games, which is kind of weird. Just like it's kind of ballooned. There's a big market for horror games, presumably. Yeah, it's really cool. It's definitely a motivator, like, especially when you can kind of see stuff translating to wish lists on the game. There was I don't know, a while back before the man-child took over Twitter, where you could like post, and I'd like do a post, link to the Steam page in the comments. The post would get some traction. I checked Steam the next day, and I could see like a visible bump of like a few hundred people that have directly gone from Twitter to Steam and wishlisted it. And yeah, it's like a really, really motivating. Really, yeah. I don't think if no one had liked the game and they hadn't, shared it about and stuff, I probably wouldn't have bothered. I'd just
Yeah.
go back to doing a different job.
Well, I mean, obviously, certainly glad that didn't happen, because
No.
what we've seen looks extremely interesting. Very excited to kind of see the finished product and everything.
Yeah, thank you.
So, I mean, on that front, what's kind of next in terms of like where you're up to? I mean, obviously you've mentioned doing the soundtrack and stuff. Is that kind of the main plan for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big kind of hurdles that are coming up. I've put off doing the ending cutscenes, partially because of the whole animation thing I mentioned before. But so the endings are like planned out. I'm going to have multiple endings, and the game is now playable from start all the way up to where the final ending location, which is quite a small location, occurs, and the cutscenes themselves. So they're probably the next big thing that I'll tackle. Hopefully within the next sort of month or so, I'll be moving on to them. But prior to doing that, I'm just making sure that code-wise and sound design-wise, everything is tight. Because I find when projects get bigger, they get more complex, and certain aspects of them you might have made like 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and then coming back to them, you sort of have to relearn your way around the systems again. So if I was to like move on to the ending cutscenes right now, stuff that I'm doing at the moment, like tweaking enemy attack values and enemy placement and item spawns and stuff, that would be like something that I'd kind of have to get back into the right headspace to do again. So yeah, next thing up, ending cutscenes.
Cool. So, I mean, we won't say, because it's tempting to go. Is that the point at which you'll decide kind of when you're going to release the game?
Yeah, probably. Like I'm aiming for some point early next year. I've told a few people that. Might be naively optimistic because obviously soundtrack work stuff to do, ending cutscenes still to do. But it's gotten to the point with the project where it's getting to be a lot of work mentally. Like I do this full time, so like day in, day out, I'm in the project. I've been working weekends quite a lot for the last few months as well. So I'm very much ready to get this out and get people playing it. And yeah, I'm really hoping that I'll be hitting that goal sort of early next year.
Yeah, I bet you must have that release itch because as you said, like you can play all the way through now. You must be like, I just want to get it out now.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I could just push it out. I could just like really quickly do the endings and get it out there. But yeah, I think it deserves like this extra layer of care that Chasing Static was kind of an experiment, and it has some rough edges and stuff, and like the thing about when you release a game, you'll get hundreds of people saying it's great, which is really, really nice, super motivational. But then you get people giving you constructive criticism as well. It's not just like haters, hating on the game, but you'll get people who like say, "Oh, it was really great, but this bit, didn't work quite well, or this bit felt a bit off." And generally, all of those things are things that you kind of knew yourself, but you didn't have like the technical knowledge or the time to do. So I'm trying to like minimize as many of those things as possible with Hollowbody. so that like when I release it, I can think, you know, I've done my absolute best on this. It doesn't matter, even if people say it's rubbish and don't like it. You know, I've put everything I can into it. It's not my fault it's bad. Well, it probably is my fault it's bad, but at least I tried.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, we mentioned a bit of it earlier on, but have you had a chance to play much of other horror offerings from other developers that have come out this year?
Mostly, I'm trying to think back. I played a bit of Dredge. I'm thinking of indies here. Played Saturnalia. I think that's how you
Yes,
pronounce
yeah.
the name. Yeah, that was really cool. Really, really interesting sort of approach to things. And like a really great art style as well. What else is there? I'm playing through. I can't remember the name at the moment. It's got a woman with a camera on the for the box art. It's 2D. It's made by a developer I really like. Sorry, I'm tired. My brain's gone blank.
Fine.
Playing that at the moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, I played through most of the AAA horror games this year, just because we traditionally haven't gotten many of them recently. So,
True.
Yeah, went through them.
Yeah.
Oh, Homebody. I played that as well. That was really cool, even though they have a very similar name to my game.
Yes.
They clearly thought of that name before I thought of my name as well, so I can't even hold it against them. But, yeah, that game was cool. Like great, like really cool scope as well, because it was all just set in like this one house essentially, with loads of really fun puzzles and a nice hook and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah. Oh, was it After Dream, the other one you were thinking of?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, it's
Jesse, wasn't it? Jesse.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah, no, that was definitely really good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, really enjoying it. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the story yet, like as in I haven't got my head around what everything is, but yeah, enjoying it.
Yeah,
very much enjoying
that's
it.
good. So from the games that you've played then, or from what you've seen, obviously we're on the hunt for the horror game of the year. What would your pick be?
Oh, just indies or in general?
Just horror in general.
I
Could be
suppose for
anything.
the horror award, it's got to be Alan Wake 2. I'm sorry, Alan Wake 2 has blown me away. Like I'm a fan of Alan Wake. I love the original. I played the remaster recently, but yeah, it's just done things for me, that game. It ticks so many boxes in regards to like stuff that I'm into. Yeah, and like just the whole mixed media thing with like the way they've integrated video and live action into it. Phenomenal. Yeah, it's probably my game of the last few years, to be honest. It's really, really enjoying it.
Yeah, I think that's going to sway a few heads, I think, because obviously we knew it was going to be a great game, but we didn't know how good it was going to be, I don't think.
Yeah, I was skeptical when they were going survival horror, or they're calling it survival horror anyway. I was skeptical when they were going for like the much darker tone, because Alan Wake, like the original, it's got some really great set pieces that are kind of reliant on that action horror sort of element.
Yeah,
like fighting off monsters on a stage with fireworks going off and like heavy metal playing in the background. So iconic scene from the first game. I don't think they could really pull that off in the second one, but yeah, I haven't finished it yet. I had a convention at the weekend, so I was away, but I feel like I'm kind of closing in on the ending now for the second one. But yeah, still, I've not finished it, and I still think it's probably definitely my game of the year, if not my game of the last few years, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't even played the first one until like literally the day before it came out, and then I was like till 3 a.m. playing it. So it completely took me by surprise as well. But then, yeah, I'm a believer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to get some. I mean, obviously, in your awards show, I could see it potentially taking top spot. I think like in like the Game Awards, like the Jeff Keighley thingy, you know, that guy, whoever he is, Knightley, Keighley, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Anyway, small time. But I reckon in that one it needs to get some recognition too, because for me, Game of the Year for sure.
Yeah, it will certainly be interesting to see how much horror gets to look in this year compared to not at all the last couple of years.
Yeah. Horror's definitely, you know, it's made a good effort to get noticed this year. There's been a few bangers, to be honest. So yeah, I'd hope that it gets some kind of recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, speaking of recognition, obviously the general thing that we encourage people to do after checking out these interviews is to check out the games on Steam and wishlist them. But that's presumably the main thing that you encourage people to do for Hollowbody. But is there anything else in terms of things that can help with kind of the game, or is it just get as many wish lists as possible?
Obviously, wish listing the game is super helpful. But yeah, if anyone wants, well, you know, if you've got friends who dig survival horror, they like narrative games, they like Silent Hill, let them know. If anyone wants to just chill and hang out and talk horror games, we have a Headware Games community on Discord. There's a link to that on my Twitter profile. Everything. All of my socials are at Headware Games. So yeah, if you ever want to like chat or hang out, just look for Headware Games and you'll find me somewhere.
Yep. And we will have links to all of that in the description of the video. So very easy for people to just have a click and check it out. So are you planning on, is it at the moment, is it just to release on Steam, or are you looking at console releases in the future as well?
So the plan is I'm going to go for Steam first. I don't have a publisher for Hollowbody yet. I might look for one to help with the launch. I've spoken to like a few and stuff, but the plan at the moment is to self-publish, which will consist of me releasing on Steam first, and then potentially, well, ideally console ports. I mean, I play all my games on PlayStation. I don't really play games on PC. So for me, it's pretty important to get the games I make on consoles as well. So I'm sure that will definitely happen at some point. But initially it will be Steam.
Cool. Yeah, because I mean, the other reason I ask, apart from general interest, is like you can, I think Xbox do it as well. Like, but I know PlayStation certainly does. They have their own equivalent of wish listing nowadays.
Yeah.
So when there's ports come up, it's good to encourage people to wish list wherever they want to play the game.
Yeah. So it's not got a listing on PlayStation or Xbox yet, but maybe it will do in the future. I'll have to poke my guy at PlayStation, because I have a guy at PlayStation. That's pretty cool, right? That's like, I've barely spoken to him, but I'm hoping that that's probably a sign that something might happen with PlayStation at some point. But, yeah.
Cool. Well, either way, we look forward to seeing what's to come, and I'm sure from Horror Game Awards' point of view, we'll be eagerly sharing any news once we get it. But in the meantime, thank you very, very much for chatting to us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for asking me on. It's great. Yeah, I love talking about the game. It's been a pleasure as well.
Yep. And thank you everyone for watching, and we'll hopefully catch you on the next one.
Yeah. All right.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah. See you later.
Good work.
This has been Talking Terror, the official podcast of the Horror Game Awards. Thank you very much for listening.
Right.
Check out the links in the description for more info on where to follow our guests in order to support them and keep up to date with their work. The Horror Game Awards will be airing live on YouTube on Saturday the 16th of December. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel to avoid missing out on what promises to be a very exciting night of awards and game reveals, as well as future episodes of this podcast and other content. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.